underway. And in our next conversation now, it's part of our Investors series here at 4 Years From Now, a series of events, conversations, parts of the show across the 2 floors where we're focusing on investment, obviously. And this conversation on stage is going to explore, pull at some of the threads around emerging trends in the B2B VC space, the importance of founder-investor relationships and strategies for building resilient and high-impact startups. So, this panel is going to be asking and hopefully answering the question, how do we build a winning B2B ecosystem in Europe? Please join me in welcoming to the stage our founding partner at Visionaries Club, Robert Lacher, and our moderator for this session, Jose Maria Ciotta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to this amazing panel and guest speaker that we have today. But before starting, and those who are in at the end, please feel free to come. You are at the right place at the right moment. First of all, please raise your hand. Who are the entrepreneurs in the room? Entrepreneurs? Any entrepreneurs? I see a few hands. OK, awesome. Any investors in the room? Investors? 1 or 2 hands at the end. Thank you. Corporations? Others? Brilliant. So during the next 22 minutes, it's my privilege to be here with someone that I'm not going to introduce, because he is one of the most successful investors across, but he usually listens pitch from investors. Today, we are going to ask him to pitch. So you have to convince the audience in just 30 seconds why they have to keep listening for the next 20 minutes.
I love this. Well, look, first of all, thanks so much for having me in Barcelona. It's a huge honor. Look, I think these geopolitical shocks that we have right now, these tectonic shifts, are the single biggest opportunities building a startup company or really changing things. So the reason why I'm super excited about this is, it's a huge chance right now with this shock to build a new business model for Europe. And I think we're big believers that the future of GDP will be driven by tech, right? And all of you people here in the room, you're founders, you're building tech. So it's basically really in your hands and in our hands directly to shape this direction, to build new companies and really take Europe back to the next level again. And it's not just talking politics, it's not theory, it's really quit talking, start doing. So I hope in the next 30 minutes we can talk a little bit about that.
Awesome. As you know, he's also very well connected in the Visionaries Club. He has been interviewing founders and CEOs from Google, LinkedIn, and many more. And if you check on YouTube, the other day I was checking his last interview with the Google former CEO, Eric Smith, and he was asking on the why he became an entrepreneur and the journey. I would love to hear about your journey. You have been from Harvard to BCG in consulting, then a founder, now an investor. How has been this journey for you?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. So I think if I'm honest, the North Star of this journey has been really following my passion and obsession and never trying to compromise on it. And it's something difficult in life, right? Because you go to university, you might get good offers to work for a company, but staying true to your core values and challenging you each Monday morning, am I excited about the week and what I'm doing? That's what I try to do. And I think the path then to venture capital, I couldn't have planned that. So it started with a lecture I had when I was 20 in Boston for the first time in my life hearing about venture capital. And I came home and thought, like, this must be the most beautiful job on earth if you're speaking to young founders every day that are highly motivated, that are really building companies. And I thought, like, my dream was one day in my life to do this, maybe when I'm 50, 60 and sold my company. But I think the dots connected in a different way much earlier. So I wanted to start a company out of university, so we almost had the term sheet signed, but then I got talking to Boston Consulting Group, as you mentioned. But my mentor back then was Jochen Engert, who was still at BCG, but then he left and started Flixbus, so became a really good friend of mine. And I was again the mentor of Max Fissmann, who's a family entrepreneur. So total other side of entrepreneurship, he inherited a 100-year-old company with 15,000 employees and 5 billion in revenues, but That was in 2013 a wake-up call for us because we figured out there's no opportunity between entrepreneurs that have built Europe in the past, like all those great family businesses like Swarovski, Mittal, and those that reinvent the future. So that's how the idea came together to build a Visionaries Club, and before La Familia, a venture capital fund that I started before. So that's how the opportunities emerged. And I was also starting a company in the meantime, which I sold to Zalando, so that was my entrepreneurial journey, but that's how the dots connected.
Moreover, he's very humble. But you know that for those who are looking for investment, he has more than 600 million of assets under management, but not from any LP. He has been able, successfully, to attract funding from founders in Spotify, Skype, families such as Swarovski, corporations such as Siemens, and they have currently 3 funds. One for pre-seed investment, one for seed investment, and one for early growth. What's the strategy?
Yeah, look, it starts, and thank you for mentioning a little bit more about our LP base. I think the core difference of us compared to other VCs is that we only took on board very successful entrepreneurs as our investors. Because if you're building a company, you have to answer 100 questions a day of complexity and trying to do things right. And beyond the money, the best advice that you can get is from a founder or an entrepreneur that has really authentically gone through that journey. And that's why we said at Visionaries, we can be the best partner of founders if we really have not like a 5 out of 10 advice to them or a kind of a bullshit high-level experience that we share, but really bring them in touch with those people who have built companies like Spotify, UiPath, Miro, Zalando, some of the Europe's best companies, because these people have gone through the journey. They can be your best sparring partners. And that's the whole idea of Visionaries Club, and that's, I think, also what makes us a little different. But then again, we're talking a lot about software here and really how software AI is changing the world. But 95% of our economy in Europe is not digital. It's basically industrial world market leaders or companies that are in traditional industries. So you need to sell into them. You need to disrupt these companies. And that's really, really difficult. So that's why we have 25 family entrepreneurs also as investors. And you mentioned like Markus Swarovski or Sunil Mittal. They've built some of the big companies of the past, right? So this is the biggest enablement for software companies. And we bring those 2 groups together to try to really unlock the potential that we have here in Europe.
Here, besides entrepreneurs, we also have investors. How is the secret sauce to attract such an amazing group of limited partners?
Yeah. Look, I think it's, again, what I said 5 minutes ago. If you follow your passion and you're authentic in what you're doing, that's the best thing dealing with these entrepreneurs. Because let me try to give you an example. When we invest in a founder or when I speak to a founder, what I would love to see is product obsession. I don't want to see just someone from business school who says, I want to get rich or I want to build another company. Someone who's deeply obsessed about the product. And look at the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, whether it's a Mark Zuckerberg being obsessed about social, or you go to Europe and Daniel from Spotify is obsessed about disrupting the music industry. So that's that kind of energy I want to see in the eyes of a founder. If you turn into the perspective of one of our investors, who are also all entrepreneurs, they want to see this obsession in my eyes, being obsessed about building the best product in venture capital and reinventing venture capital. And I think that's the first thing that really matters, to be authentic and obsessed with that network. The second thing is relevance. So we really try to do introductions only when they are relevant and really keep a high quality of people. Third thing is integrity. I think it's easy to build a business being kind of an asshole founder. You can move faster sometimes taking shortcuts. But it's even more difficult to build a great business if you're a 100% high integrity person. And everyone that's part of Visionaries has built phenomenal companies being a high integrity person. So it's a little like with a nightclub. So we try to keep a network and a group of people that surround us and founders that we back that have this integrity and that just enjoy being with each other. And I think it's something that people never talk about much, but something that makes such a difference in this kind of keeping these relationships and network together. And then it's, of course, a few other things. I think very long-term perspective. So we really have a 20, 30-year perspective with what we're doing and some of our investments. And the depth associated to it, right? So to not be too high level, but really in this network make meaningful connections that have depth and impact.
By the way, I love the movie you mentioned. Now let's go back to Europe. As you know, in the last Draghi's report, only 4, out of the biggest 50 tech giants, only 4 are in Europe. And we have right now plenty of challenges, as you know much better than me: lack of a single market, risk-averse culture, red tape, bureaucracy. Let's focus into one of the problems, which is lack of funding in early stage and growth. You have a huge experience on the investment ecosystem with unicorn founders, family offices, venture capital investors, corporations, to which we have to focus on in Europe, and what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and we could discuss hours about it. So with regard to lack of funding, I have a pretty clear perspective and think we really need to differentiate between deep tech and software and AI. So if we look at software, at AI, there is really no lack of funding. So I would say the opposite. There is even too much capital in the market. You could see it during the COVID bubble, and you can see it right now with the AI bubble. And I'm investing every day in founders, and it's so competitive, I can tell you, because the good founders, the good business models really get overrun by funding by VCs, also at the late growth stage. So I think in software and AI, we have more than enough money in Europe, and we shouldn't confuse lack of funding with the selection effect that venture capital has to try to only optimize backing the winning ideas and teams. And this is something very healthy, because otherwise we're just building bubble companies. I think it's the total opposite in deep tech, and that's the challenge in Europe. Because if you look at deep tech, it's much more risky. It involves hardware development, production, and much deeper pockets. So you could say if you build a software company with 1 million, today, you use tools like Lovable, and you can almost build a HR SaaS company and start shipping with a 1 million investment. If you go into fusion energy, robotics, like deep tech, you easily need 100 million or 500 million to just have the first prototype or go to market. So what does that mean? An investor investing in deep tech just needs maybe 10 times the amount of money in a fund to build this risk profile. We don't have these large funds in Europe, and it's a massive problem. Where do I see the opportunity? If you look at deep tech in the US, who is sponsoring it? It's Google, it's Amazon, it's Facebook, and all those companies that are tech giants that are massively profitable, and because they have so much profit each year, they can afford to take this risk going into deep tech things like autonomous driving and all those technologies they have driven. In Europe, we have the same. It's just packaged in a different way. All those family entrepreneurs that we discussed 10 minutes ago, they are highly profitable, many of them billionaires, and they can be our Google or they can be our Facebook because they can invest in deep tech. And I give you a few examples. You all remember the COVID years and BioNTech, the company that was providing the vaccine to, I think, maybe half of the European people. BioNTech was funded in a seed round in 2008, a 100 million seed round, by the private investors called Strüngmann Brothers. So they were billionaires. They sold their pharma company for 8 billion, and they were bold. They were saying, we don't chill in the south of France and have a good life. We reinvest this money, taking risk into next generation high-risk deep tech companies. And BioNTech back then, in the middle of the financial crisis, investing 100 million in a company where maybe there's a 90% chance that it is a write-off, was bold. I give another example. Helsing, which is now the leading startup defense company in Europe, wasn't backed by any VC. It was Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, that put in 100 million of his private wealth into the Series A round of this company. So long story short, the potential I see in Europe is in deep tech. We need to get those family entrepreneur billionaires, those people that were risk-taking in the past, to reinvest their money boldly into these technologies. And also their domain knowledge, because deep tech is something we're super strong in Europe. Like all those companies, look at those world market leaders, whether it's Miele or whether it's, go to Italy, France, Spain, all those hardware tech companies were born in Europe. So long monologue, but that's a little bit my perspective on it.
It's interesting you mentioned the difference between deep tech and AI. Let's focus on AI. And for that, I want to cite two interviewees that you had at the Visionaries Club. One is LinkedIn founder Roy Hoffman and CEO of Microsoft. On the first one, he mentioned, in the World Cup of football of game of AI, we're going to play in Europe the role of the referee between the US and China. However, referees never win. That's quote number one. Number two, in another of your interviews, in another interview with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, he envisions from SaaS to agentic AI. Some concluded SaaS is dead. Now, my question for you is, you have quite a huge perspective on the future of Europe, on investment, on startups. You have a lot of expertise in AI, SaaS. With these two quotes, how do you envision the future and this movement from SaaS to agentic AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me start with this quote that you mentioned by Reid Hoffman, who is a founder of LinkedIn, but also was the co-initiator of OpenAI. And he loves Europe, by the way. But a referee never wins. It's very true for Europe, because if I look in the last 20 years, we've been really sleepwalking, at least in Germany. We've been preserving the status quo, and we really loved talking about the world, how everyone needs to be more democratic, and really discussing a lot of values, but not really acting on it. And that's why I think he's very right. If you look at AI, this is really dangerous right now, because if we focus most of our time on how to regulate it and all the things that can go wrong with AI and how China should maybe do it differently than the US, does it bring any economic value to us? No. And I think we're not in this situation right now, if you look at geopolitics and everything, to continue just to be the referee. We need to get into the action mode in building great companies. To your second question, is SaaS dead, or is AI killing SaaS? Yes and no. Let me put it in a different way. The reason why I started this year being so excited as an investor is that AI is killing traditional software. So that is true. If you just look at, we made an investment in a company called Lovable, which grew from 0 to like 20 million in ARR within 3 months. And it's basically, you can try it out, Lovable I think AI or .net. So you can basically, with prompt, just with writing a few sentences, you can build a whole software. You can tell them, build me an HR software, build me a website. And this is disrupting the traditional way software is built, and it's disrupting the traditional way software is used. Let me take a different perspective to make sure that we don't confuse things. AI is software. So AI is shipped as software as a service. And the opportunity, we think, is 10 times larger than the opportunity has been with traditional software 10 years ago. If you look at the cloud development in the last 20 years, it has been phenomenal, it has been exponential, and you can see how big SaaS has become. We think AI will only 10x this opportunity, because what we see today is that even traditional software, look at Microsoft and all those companies, they implement AI, and AI is basically a kind of giving superpowers to traditional software, because suddenly it's so much easier for everyone to use software, it's so much more intuitive. So traditional SaaS has the opportunity to really rather get amplified by AI. The second thing is, what I just mentioned, the disruption of traditional software with AI is a massive opportunity now to build a new company, because if you now start a company in software, you can in 3 months build a software that 5 years ago would have taken 2 years to build. So you can catch up really fast with the status quo. But if you're smart enough to leverage the latest AI features, and who knows, when we get into AGI, you can really, really build phenomenal companies in a much bigger market that we've ever had before. So that's a little bit how we see it from an investment perspective.
I like the analogy of the superpower. So before we enter into the Q&A from the audience, and you can start preparing your questions, I would like to ask one last question about superpowers, which is the superpower of Visionaries Club. So I can imagine that everyone is going to come to you afterwards in the networking. My question for you, and in just 30 seconds, why an entrepreneur should come to your fund, and why a limited partner should support you in your funding strategy?
Yeah, great question, and you have to ask our entrepreneurs to give the honest answer. I can try to give the one how I think about it. I think there's 3 reasons as a founder why I would work with Visionaries. Number 1, obsession. We're entrepreneurs ourselves. We're not just investors. We are every day trying to build the leading new venture capital fund of our generation. And this gives us an entrepreneurial energy, authenticity, to really be on the eye level with founders and being very aligned with the mindset and the mission. So that's the best thing I can offer to a founder, is the joy of building, and myself being passionate about being an entrepreneur, because that's authentic. Number 2, there's no fund in Europe and even globally that has such a high density of the smartest entrepreneurs that have built the most world-leading companies that are directly available for you to work with to put you in the best situation to build a leading company. That's number two. And number three, we stay very focused and independent as a fund. You know, there were so many US firms that wanted to acquire us or build access to the European market. We would never do this because we think we want to be independent at the side of the founders at the early stages and let them choose whether they want to work with the Sequoia as a Series A investor, an Index Ventures, or whatever fund is the best fund. So that's the promise I would give entrepreneurs. If you ask an LP, so an investor in our fund, why would they back us? We answered it a little bit 10 minutes ago. I think this obsession of us really building a new leading venture capital approach of our generation. Number two, and you mentioned the Paris event we did 2 weeks ago, so we bring our community really actively together. So I think for our investors, they love the exchange with other entrepreneurs. If you build a company like Zalando and you meet the founder of Google and you then speak to the founder of Spotify, that is compounding in impulses that really challenge you to think to the next level. And the third thing, and that's the most important thing, to be very honest, is just to make great returns. So we were lucky with our first fund, we were able to give the money back 11 times to our investors, so we really work hard to keep that profile. It won't be possible with every fund, but if we do our job well and if we deliver well, we just need to perform well. If we don't, people will leave us and people will say, we don't give you our money anymore.
I like the part of the community, so let's go with the community. You have 5 minutes left for questions. You can ask Robert, who has traveling from...
Sorry?
From where have you landed?
From Munich.
From Munich, just to be with you and you can ask any questions for the next 5 minutes. Any questions? I see this gentleman in the first row. If we can bring him a mic. The mic is coming.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, this is Jeff too. Yeah, you have mentioned one factor in Europe, singular market. There's a great, which is said by the Draghi report. I would like to hear from Robert. Yeah, how do you think Europe can overcome this, fragmented market? China and the US, they are really singular market. They can easily scale up the startup. I think this is drawback in Europe. I want to see a strong Europe, to make much more growth faster.
Yeah. It's an amazing question, and it's really a matter of perspective, and I try to take both perspectives. So let me try with the adversity perspective why this is super bad. Yes, it takes longer to scale a company in Europe. You have, 10 languages. You have, I don't know how many countries and sub-regions, and scaling into all those legislations, and it is tough. It takes longer than in US, and it takes longer than in China. That's just fact. I want to turn it around. Isn't that an advantage for us in Europe? Because if you build a company in Europe, we understand our continent. It is a bloody big technology moat for a US company or a Chinese company to do that in Europe. So if you're a smart founder, you can own Europe and build the category leader here because you're live in Spain, you're live in France, you're live in the Nordics or in Germany. It will be almost impossible for a US software company to follow that path. It will just even be more difficult for them. On the other side, if you scale into the US and China, it's very easy for you to scale fast. So what we see in our portfolio is actually exactly the opposite, that AI is global from day one. If you built a software company 10 years ago, it took 10 years to scale to other countries and to US. If you look at a software company today or an AI company, there is no expansion. You're just global from day one. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I lost the track now a little bit, but so global from day one. The second thing is that I wanted to talk about another advantage, just to keep out optimistic. No, I think we have to also just take a long-term perspective like this. This isn't something that changes in 1 or 2 years, because we need to overcome this decentralization, mainly bringing teams together to form ideas and to form people that have ideas, customers, and capital into an inventive network. And that's just more difficult in a decentralized Europe, because in US you have Silicon Valley, in China you have clusters around Shanghai and Beijing and Tsinghua University and so on. And in Europe it's just very fragmented. So doing things like Mobile World Congress, and we're at Visionaries really at the heart of trying to bring people together from different nations during university to start ideas. I think that's where we really need to put our energy in. And the last thing is, like, look, take a 2,000-year perspective. If you look at on a timeline, Europe has, for most of the time, been by far the strongest continent globally in terms of the innovations, whether it's penicillin that we innovated, whether it's cars, whether it's all those kind of traditional innovation. It's in Europe. We've overcome that decentralized element in the past. And in the digital age, it's even easier because you can work remote. AI is global from day one. It can be shipped remotely. So these are a few spontaneous thoughts to a good question.
Thank you very much. I see that there are 2 minutes left. We have either one last quick question. Lady of the 4th row. Quick question, quick answer. 2 minutes left.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for these optimistic thoughts. There's a lot of big numbers flying recently in Europe. 800 billion announced by Ursula von der Leyen recently. Around 1 trillion being discussed in Germany as we speak. Do you think that this might be a game changer when it comes to European VC ecosystem, especially in the B2B, which is the topic of this conversation? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's a game changer. I don't think in the VC ecosystem, because as mentioned, I believe there's enough money in software and the money is pretty global. I think for our economy, because the tricky part, if you take Germany as an example, we had this, we have the lowest debt rate globally in developed countries. And the question is, like, is it smart to keep it in times like these and not have any government spending increase? So I think it's a huge stimulation for the economy if you have defense, if you look at companies like Helsing in the startup ecosystem, but also traditional companies. I think this will not only make us more independent on the military side, which is so needed, it has been such a wake-up call, but it will be a boost for the economy. Throwing 800 billion into the economy will just create more jobs. More people will have more money to spend again on consumer. So I think the strength about the US is it's a closed ecosystem where 300 million people spend money and they are basically independent because of this. Germany, for example, is very export-oriented. Spain is also very export-oriented. So the more we build this ecosystem in Europe again to encourage to consume and to basically give that stimulus to the economy, I think it's a very strong thing to do.
It's the time. Thank you very much for listening, and a big applause for Robert.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.